I was watching the Saints play the Cowboys on television when my 15-year-old daughter, Grace, told me that in 7 months, I would be a grandfather. Initial reactions were bewilderment, but were quickly followed by anger, since I knew her 17-year-old boyfriend, the disgraceful slang-tongued shell of a man, would not take his newfound duties seriously. My wife Lauren cried and asked rhetorical questions to Grace about her money, college, and shattered aspirations. My daughter was past the phase of shell-shocked, having known about her pregnancy for a month, and did her best to pass her optimism to my wife and I. Tears fell on our carpet, as did our knees in prayer, when we huddled together and I promised to make the best of the situation and help my family in any way. Grace's boyfriend William surprised me by how supportive he became during the pregnancy. Late night runs to the store, learning about child development, and conversations with Lauren and I became common with William. I was impressed. As Grace's belly grew, so did her boyfriend's bond with our family. Rumors spread around our tight-knit community about our pregnant teenager, but I knew throwing fits would only embarrass her. Besides, I was getting everything a father could ask for, with a grandchild and the joining of a respectable man with my daughter. We all attended church together, ate supper together, and picked out items for the baby together. My promise was being kept. 9 hours of labor and miles of nervous pacing for William and I is what it took for baby Nicholas to be brought into our world. Already chubby with a head full of dark hair, I knew he was destined for greatness. A senator, an attorney, maybe a best-selling author. Nicholas's opportunities were endless as he started this world surrounded by loved ones. We took turns holding him. I have never seen Grace or Lauren so happy. William and I did our best to hide our tears of joy, but failed. Nicholas, or Nick as we began to call him, was perfect. Nick and his parents lived with Lauren and I until they could develop a good financial foundation. William began working construction, and Grace helped around my lawn maintenance business, doing clerical work for some money. They began attending William's church, saving money and looking for homes to buy. Upset by the fact they both needed to drop out of high school, Grace began looking at the GED program and evaluating options and achieving an associate's degree at the local community college. By the time Nick was 5 months old, my Grace had transformed from an irresponsible teenager into a loving mother who was patently focused on the future. I was getting ready for work one morning when Grace's screams pierced the silence. Screams that could sink a mountain flush with the horizon. The entire house erupted in panic and action, but we couldn't change anything. At the hospital, nurses prodded my daughter and William with questions about sleeping positions, even asking my wife and I about issues involving drug use or physical abuse. Our family's responses were emotional and terse. But still, the nurses had to ask. The doctors called it SIDS, something I'd never heard of before that day, and explained how rare the condition was in America. It's not rare enough. After Nick's funeral, Grace and William declined into an antisocial depression, locking themselves in their room for hours. They closed Lauren and myself out physically and emotionally. Knocks at their door went unanswered, or worse. The four of us couldn't grieve together, so the silence became disputes, and the disputes became abusive confrontations. I watched my wholesome family slip through my fingers as everyone tossed blame around and vented aggressively about losing Nick. The only peace Lauren and I had was when the couple visited their church, which happened several times a week after losing their baby. Grace had become distant from me and stopped coming to work. William stopped speaking to me altogether. Lauren filled her days with pettiness and animosity. The promise I made was shriveling away before my eyes. Lauren grew tired of the virulent behavior and relented her ill will by joining William and Grace in the service of their new church. Being a deacon, I continued going to the church we had been members at for 2 decades, but I wasn't going to preclude my wife from mending a relationship with our daughter. Soon, they became close, Even William was eager to help Lauren around the house once all three started visiting the church multiple times a week. I asked my wife about the church, and she responded saying it was modern, unique, and provided helpful activities to help our daughter get over the death of Nick. As a father and husband, I knew a healing stage was important for the women in my life. One night, about a month after Nick's death, I woke up to the sound of the back door closing. I peeked through the blinds to find William using a shovel in the backyard. Grace and Lauren stood beside him holding candles, chanting a song foreign to me. I decided not to interrupt, since everyone grieves differently. The last thing I wanted to do was ruin a tribute to Nick. After they made their peace, they came inside, and each went to their bedroom. Lauren wiped tears from her eyes as she laid down and kissed me on the forehead, thinking I was asleep. Hearing Grace cry through the walls upset me, but I continued to pretend I was asleep early into the morning. I hoped their secret ceremony healed my daughter's heart and brought her back into my life. I was willing to do whatever it took to keep my promise, even if that meant doing nothing. The next night, I shook my wife from her sleep after hearing a faint sound. We shut off the HVAC unit and oscillating fan to cancel unwanted noise, only to detect the source and rush outside. Cries from a baby, faint but audible, were emanating from the shallow hole dug by William the previous night. Choking cries pulled us to our knees before my wife and I dug our fingernails into the soil, removing handfuls at a time, until a feeble, thin finger was exposed. It was moving. I shifted back in horror as my wife continued to throw handfuls of dirt away. Grace and William jolted out of the house right as Lauren lifted a naked infant out of the earth, screaming and begging like just out of the womb. William swaddled the newborn in a cloth printed with a winged man with a goat's head and passed the wailing child to my daughter. Lauren and William gathered around Grace while she let the baby suckle, causing a silence to pass over our backyard like a fog. I got to my feet and stumbled toward my family. The infant was chubby and had a head full of dark hair. It was Nick. The three of them were uneasy when I approached. My ignorant questions were met with sympathetic stares from my wife and a scoff from William. Where the baby fed, a white residue should have appeared, along with the fatty white dribble from the unsucked milk. But a thick substance was in its place, the excess soaking the side of Grace's shirt into violent shades of red. Nick ate. The others coddled. I vomited. "What is this abomination?" I yelled at my loved ones as they brushed dirt from Nick's hair. "It is mercy for our good faith," William blasted back. "Honey, Grace and Nick have another chance," Lauren said, holding back tears. "I don't understand. How did this happen?" "Her," Grace said, looking past me. I turned and inside the threshold of our back door, obstructed by darkness, stood a tall woman who was nude, skinny, and appeared to have a disease of the skin. Black hair flowed past her hips, and she slightly leaned her weight side to side, as if swaying to music only she could hear. Her head was misshapen and her eyes had sunk so far into her skull they appeared as holes. Her dry lips split and cracked, and she opened her mouth to reveal a dozen voices speaking simultaneously. "A soul for a soul." I turned to my family. Lauren was sobbing and mouthing "I love you." William stared at the woman, smiling. Grace kissed Nick on the head before turning toward me. "Dad," Grace said, "this was the only way. You promised you would do anything to help us. You promised." I nodded and wiped away tears. "May I have some time?" I asked the woman. She nodded and sunk back to the shadows of my home. That was 1 week ago. After everything that happened, my mind still doesn't process it. But I can't argue with reality when I hold my grandson in the palm of my hands. Members from William's church have visited often since the rebirth of Nick. They have held him more than me. Lauren is proud, and I have never seen Grace so happy. However, every day since the woman appeared, Nick has gotten sicker. What started as a small rash grew into a cough, then a fever. So I know the clock is ticking for me to give myself up. Soul for a soul. Nicholas's opportunities are endless, as he starts this world surrounded by loved ones. I rocked my grandson to sleep last night. He is perfect. Tonight my tears fell on the carpet, as did my knees in prayer, when I promised to make the best of the situation and help my family in any way. I made up my mind that tomorrow will be the night I keep my promise. Thank you all for listening. You like what you hear? You can check out other narrations and other videos I've done on here if you wish. You can also follow me on Twitter for updates, Instagram for pictures, and Twitch for livestream interactions. Also, don't be shy. Feel free to suggest any other stories you'd like me to feature on here. Have a good night.